That is your seed, our seed. And now we're going to begin to get to know the stories of these elderly couples. Week by week, there's 6 couples. We're going to see how they lived. It's incredible. This is the greatest luxury that we could have done with the materials that we had in Cuba. But the way they used to live, because now they've received the homes. We're watching all this with a delay. It's deferred. But the way they used to live in inhumane conditions, it's not that they were poor. They didn't have running water. They didn't have anywhere to cook, anywhere to go to the restroom. And at an age where there is no more hope that you'll be able to buy a home one day, that they might be able to buy furniture. So this speaks to the fact that when there is a joy to give, when we give with our hearts, the Lord says that as we've done it for His little ones, let us not forget that we did it for the Lord. And when that reward arrives, we will know that we've been a blessing. Beloved people, here and at home, are we ready? Very well. Today, I have a word for all those that have reached that specific moment in which you do everything you should do, but even then, you feel that you continue to be stagnant for some reason. This is a message for those that have prayed with great faith, but the situation, for some reason, I insist, it continued to get worse, and the miracle never arrived. Sometimes dawn doesn't arrive at the time you expected. That's why I insist. This is a word for those that feel that there are occasions in which the heavens remain completely silent. Maybe you tried to make your marriage work, but even then, your spouse turned their back on you and they abandoned you. Maybe you prayed so that God could eradicate the cancer in your child. However, the doctors weren't able to remove the entire tumor. Maybe it's possible that, I don't know, maybe you took a leap of faith, beginning a new business, a new company, believing that God had called you to do so. But not long after, the business failed, and you were left in more debt than before, and you ask yourself, did God speak to me, or did I just think I heard God's voice? Why am I failing? Why am I stagnant? Not too long ago, a friend asked me, if God wants to bless us all, then why, sometimes, do some of us go into that stage where it seems like everything stops? Whether or not we're righteous or faithful, there's a season where it seems like everything stops. Not too long ago, a woman also wrote to me and said, I live from crisis to crisis. She wrote on social media. She said, when it seems like I'm going to get better from my mother's death, I receive an economic hardship. When it seems like I overcome that hardship, I realize that my son is addicted to drugs. And when I try and deal with my son, I realize that my husband is cheating on me. So she literally said that it seems like the universe conspired against her to make her life impossible. She said, I lost my capacity to fight. I don't have any energy. And I could see that this woman was under fire. She was under attack, as it happens to us sometimes. And I understand that each case is unique. Each person's life is singular. But I would run the risk of saying that the majority of cases of people that live under continuous attacks, they don't even have a week of rest. People that say, I've been under attack for years and years. I've been under fire for years. No matter what aspect of life. My humble opinion is to think that many of them, if not all those that are under attack, have moved from the center of God's will in their lives. Now, I'm not implying that God monitors our lives as if we were robots. I'm not saying He dictates our lives, telling us who to marry, what to wear, what to buy at the market, what job to take. What I'm referring to is when we make a wrong decision, when we make a bad decision, and we move away from our divine assignment, that can distance us or distance God's favor from us. When many athletes are at the peak of their careers, Some of them signed the wrong contract, and that changed their direction. That made people forget about them in the worst cases. Or in the best cases. In the worst cases, they couldn't play anymore. Leaders that signed the wrong decree and it cost them their political careers. Actors that played a terrible role and one bad movie made the world forget about them. Boxers that went into the ring when really they should have decided against it and retired. Pastors, preachers that began huge projects that wasn't born in the heart of the Lord, and they end up sick, in debt, with the church divided. What I'm trying to say is that if you want to experiment what it means to live under God's favor, we can't ignore certain decisions that are fundamental. With this introduction, I want to tell you something more. And I'm going to speak again about people that may feel stagnant. I don't know if it's a gift, but I have the hobby of making up stories. Or I think one of the most difficult arts is capturing a crowd's attention and reaching their soul through a story, right? Through articulating a story. But a beloved friend that I once presented to you, who has been here as well, I sent a greeting to him in the distance. He knows my weakness over stories. He provides me with many stories. And many years ago, his name is Italo Frigoli. Many years ago, he called me and said, he has like a radio host's voice. It's as if God were speaking to Moses at the burning bush. He said, Dante, I have a story that with your style you could really squeeze some good juice out of. He said, I have a story. And when he speaks, you're almost say, yes, Lord, speak. There are voices that are deep and almost biblical. He said, I have a story that I'm sure you'll be able to squeeze the right juice out of. Especially when I began to preach about 30 years ago, he would send me cassettes. For those that can remember what a cassette tape is, as I always say, it's about time for you to have your annual colonoscopy. And on that cassette, or whatever he gave me, it was almost like a silver bullet, you could say, that from there on out I could articulate a message or a sermon. And I remember he called this story that I'm about to share with you in just a few seconds. He called the story the Goldsteins, but I imagined a more simple Jewish last name to memorize, and I rebaptized this story as The Curious Case of the Cohens. And from here on out, from this exact moment, in an arbitrary way, an intentional way, I'm going to take the license of exiting the biblical exegesis, leaving the literal translation of the Bible, and I want you to accompany me to get to know this very particular family. It's a chronicle in which the entire historical context that surrounds this family, this very singular family, tells us that it's very possible that this might have happened. And what's true is that every time I have to share this story, it literally chills my blood. It's one of those sermons that I call classic because about 16 years ago, I preached it at the Crystal Cathedral. With a few changes, of course. The gentleman in our story wears a classic Orthodox beard, a hat that he inherited from his father. His name is Felipe. His wife's name is Rebecca. They have 4 children, as you can see. Salome, who's 12. Santiago, who is 10. Abilene, who's 7. And Asiel, who's 3 years old. The Cohens are a typical Jewish family. Felipe works with livestock. He's a very hardworking man, and he's very fearful of God. During his free time, he tells his children stories of his past as a slave to Pharaoh. Before they existed, Rebecca met her husband in Egypt. They say that she fell in love. She fell madly in love, and they had these 4 children in the desert. To be honest, the Cohens never would have been on the big stage had they not been one of the many families that lived the Exodus through the desert. And now they're being led to the promised land through the desert, led by the old patriarch Moses. To be more precise, we find the Cohens following Moses through the desert for 14 years, 3 months, and 4 days. 14 years, 3 months, and 4 days is how long they've been following Moses through the desert. A cloud guides them during the day, just as Scripture says, and a column of fire protects them during the night. And the philosophy of the Exodus is simple. If the cloud remains in the same place, then the whole camp remains below. If the cloud begins to move, then everybody picks up their things and follows the cloud. And in few words, these families are nomads until further notice. And the Cohens aren't surprised by this. They've already incorporated this into their habitual routine. In fact, these children were born during the pilgrimage. They don't know anything else that is not the white sand of the desert, of the wilderness. The only thing that alters their weekly routine is when the sentinels announce that the cloud has begun to move. Because I insist, when the cloud remains, they stay. When the cloud moves, they have to follow the cloud wherever it goes. When God moves the cloud, He's saying that they should retake their exodus. It was their GPS, the first GPS in all of history. Turn left. Wrong turn. Recalculating. It was the GPS of the time. Some theologians have debated the reasons as to why during those 40 years, why God kept them walking. The trivia is that they could have arrived in few months, but due to their disobedience, due to Israel's disobedience, God kept them wandering for 4 decades. But the question is, did God not want to give them the promised land? Yet some historians say, why didn't He just let them stay in a fixed place? But some concluded that it had to do with a matter of health and hygiene. It's not that God just wanted them to be in good physical shape, but it was a matter of hygiene. In the wilderness, there was no sewage system, so all of their residual liquids, they wouldn't go to any purification plant. There was no sanitary system in the wilderness. That's why, amongst other reasons, the cloud had to move, especially when I insist 5 million people, without counting the animals, made their deposits in the ground and buried it with sand. That's why Isaiah says that the wilderness flourished. But I say this is also a principle. The Old Testament is full of principles. This is a vital principle for any congregation. When a group of people, when a congregation doesn't move and doesn't advance toward any vision, a nauseous stench is always produced of defamation, of gossip. Show me a gossiping church and I'll show you a church that has no vision. And so the energy that should be consumed outside these walls makes it implode. The church is like manure. When it's dispersed through the land, it produces many fruits. But when it's all together bunched in one building, it expels a horrible smell. If I were a modern preacher, I would tell you, tell the person next to you, don't be manure, my brother. But no, I don't like it. I don't like it. You see, today I didn't mention Argentina, Colombia. Today I came correct. I'm a gentleman. Why should I say anything if we already won? I'm not going to say anything. Well, I'm also not going to make you repeat anything because I'm a gentleman. But going back to our story, it is believed that the vortex of the cloud rested upon the Ark of the Covenant, the holy chest. And when this vortex, when this cloud began to elevate, some sentinels that were close to the Ark of the Covenant watching this and taking care of the covenant, they would play the shofar. The shofar is a musical instrument made by a ram's horn, and in this case, in Israel's case, it was used to alert the people, especially their leader Moses, that the cloud started to move and that it was time to mobilize the caravan to continue on their exodus. So as soon as the cloud began to move, the sentinels would go, and when the patriarch heard this sound, when Moses heard the sound of the shofar, he began to corral the people with the Jewish song. He began to lecture them with this Jewish song. That's a ritual that the Hebrews used to recite scripture. It's used in Israel even today. Singing their liturgy. It's a way to memorize the Bible. It's not something we do here in the West. But the Hebrews read scripture, read the verses, the Torah, by singing it to be able to memorize it. And Numbers 10:35 tells us what that song was like. When the shofar sounded, the Bible says that Moses, when the Ark of the Covenant began to move, Moses would say, "Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered." Arise, O Israel. That was Moses' voice. He wasn't Pavarotti. It's not that he said, "Arise." No. He was a Jew. Let them flee before you. So, that was more than likely their communication system in a time before megaphones, cell phones, no amplifiers, obviously no text messages. He had to mobilize 5 million people. The cloud arose slowly from the ark. The sentinels would play their shofars, and Moses, who was nearby, would sing his song, his Jewish song. And those that were at a distance, too far to hear him, or those that were close enough to hear, would join his song, because that was a way that when all the people sang the same song, that meant it was a morning in which everybody had to pack their things and continue on their exodus. At first, when Moses sings, a few families that are nearby join in, then dozens and dozens and hundreds and thousands of families, until almost all 5 million people sang the same thing. And when the whole camp became an enormous choir, everybody knew that it was time to move. Now there are thousands singing, "Arise, O Lord," and someone else, "and let your enemies be scattered." The whole world is singing, and it's a morning of singing, which means it's time to walk. In other words, it's also a way to say, we're leaving here on our way to the promised land. We couldn't stand the stench. Somebody adds. Somebody that likes to add in new lyrics. Well, that's what the Cohen's life is all about. Camp, unpack their luggage, pack their luggage, settle down, until further notice. I insist, they've done it for 14 years. But something serious is about to happen in this family's life. Something that legend tells us will mark them forever. A surprising, unexpected turn in the story, as it always happens in any good series or anything that is deemed as such. It's believed that it all began with a private conversation in their matrimonial bed on a certain night at about 11:15 p.m. Rebecca is the one that dares tell her husband in bed, "Look, Feli, I'm tired of going in circles. I'm tired of never getting anywhere." And she said that phrase out of nowhere, and that paralyzes Felipe. But he assumes that it's just a hormonal imbalance, a mood swing, maybe a premature menopause, but she insists and says, no, really, I'm no longer willing to be a nomad. And now Felipe realizes that she's serious. This woman is upset, frustrated, upset. The man tries to calm her feelings, and he says, look, my love, you know that we're going towards the land that the Lord has promised us. I don't think there's too much road left. We're almost there. And then she asks, well, can I know what your concept is of there not being much road left? What, another 14 years? And I'm trying to raise my children in this wilderness? Eating manna daily? I don't know how else to prepare it. Fried manna, boiled manna, manna and pupusa. I want a different future for my children. I want a stable home. Is that wrong? That a mother wants a stable home to be able to sign them up at a school that's close by? A home where my friends can come and find me. I don't want to be a hippie living in a home on wheels for the rest of my life. That's a logical exhaustion. She's done. She wants to stop. She wants to establish their lives, belong somewhere. We all get to that point where we want to know what our place in this world is, whether or not we travel. What's our place? What's our city of refuge? Whether it's where we were born or where we are now, but we all dream of that place. That'll be our embassy for our soul. And she wants to be stable. Felipe tries to reconcile the situation. He says, I understand you, but we're beneath God's cloud like the rest of the people. We can't just do what we want. But she insists. Is it wrong for me to think of our children? Do you think God is going to kill me because I love my children? Is it wrong to think, just once to think in ourselves? And then she adds, Feli, don't you think it's a bit strange that we never actually get to that promised land? We've been going in circles for 14 years. What's more, you know I'm very detail-oriented. Yeah, you fell in love with me. But I'm realizing that we're just going in circles. I've seen the same stone more than 15 times. I know we've camped here before. I know it. And he says, what are you trying to say, old woman? What I'm trying to say is that how can we be sure that Moses is in his right mind? What if the sun burnt his neurons? It's fine. He was a man with good intentions, but the sun might have harmed him, and now we're at the mercy of an idealistic madman. What if the whole world is following a dictator? Felipe has been married for many years, and it's been a long time since he's decided to be happy rather than being right. Rebecca no longer wants to advance with the caravan. She wants to stay right here, and there's nothing more to debate. And finally, before they blow out the candle, she gives her verdict and her sentence. She says, Felipe, what I'm trying to say is that when the cloud moves again, you can go on your own. You're an adult. But me and the children will stay here. 2 days go by after that conversation, 48 hours. Felipe hopes that Rebecca was just having a bad night, a bad evening. But after 48 hours of having that conversation, one morning, the sentinels announce that they have to move again. And once again, the same routine. The shofar sounds. And Moses begins the lecture again, the song, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. And everybody starts to sing, Arise, O Lord. And millions of campers continue their exodus. Everyone except for the Cohens, because they made a determination 48 hours ago that they would not continue following the cloud. Their neighbors can't believe it. There is no precedent for this. They go and ask why they have this strange attitude. In so many years, nobody had decided to stay back much less when Moses begins to sing, much less when everyone's going towards the same destination, and Mr. Cohen, a bit ashamed, tries to explain what's going on without blaming Rebecca directly. He says, "No, we're a bit tired, and no, I don't share the majority of the people's vision. Some people want more details as to why they've made this strange decision, which is very singular." And so Felipe uses that famous phrase that in these cases does not admit or allow any debate. It doesn't require any common sense. He says, "Well, in reality, God spoke to me and told us to stay here." It's the most used phrase when somebody wants to disguise a whim, a tantrum, or a poor decision. God told me to stop congregating. God spoke to me and said to not tithe, to just give to the poor when I want. God told me to kill my mother-in-law. Well, that last part could be God's divine voice, but not the rest. And then, during the course of that day, a few closer friends visit Felipe and Rebecca because they want to know the actual reasons behind it all. They're the people that make up the most inner circle. Felipe can't give them an ambiguous response. He says, "Well, between us, don't tell anyone else, but we don't really agree with Moses' leadership. It's a definitive decision. We love him, we support him." That's what everyone says when they're going to speak against someone. "Oh, I love him so much, I love him, but he's going to hell." An old friend of the Cohens said, "You know what? You're right, Cohen. You're right, Felipe. I still can't do it because I have to talk to my family first. But I'm also considering that one of these days I'm also going to stay behind. Maybe not here, but maybe further ahead, because I've also found out certain things about Moses that I don't agree with. But it's just so that you can pray for him. I've always known this, and I want to give this to you as a tip. You learn it through life, or maybe with divine wisdom. It's something that you learn, that when people look for you to share some gossip, it's not because they consider you to be someone trustworthy. It's because they consider you to be the least spiritual person in the entire church. Really. If somebody comes to share gossip with you, and they say, "I can share it with you because I trust you," they're considering you a fleshly person. Don't ever think that they're sharing gossip with you because you spew out trust and holiness. No! If somebody seeks you out to speak against a pastor or a brother or sister, it's because they know that you like it and that you can connect with that type of poison. People that have that same habit, they attract each other. Throughout the course of my life, I've gotten to know very, very spiritual people. Truly spiritual, not spiritualoids that speak with a deep voice and put on a facade. No, I'm talking about people that truly love the Lord and radiate that. One of these men was Juan Carlos Ortiz, the founder of this church. And in Ortiz's case, there was something within him that I couldn't explain. But I could never dare share any gossip with him about anyone. He never said, don't speak to me about these things, but he projected a respect. First of all, I never heard him speak against anyone. He used to say, "Oh, poor person, you have to understand them. Not even the devil wants them, so who's going to love them?" So, since he didn't speak about anyone, maybe that's what it was, but he was always the last person that I would share something about someone with. I never heard him repeat any defamation. He was the last person that I would ever tell anything to, because he radiated something. I don't necessarily want to say holiness, even though etymologically speaking that's what it was, but he radiated a respect that I couldn't. And I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner with him many times. So if you're the first person that somebody looks for to spread gossip, don't feel proud about it. They see you as a fleshly person that they can deposit their trash in without you moving a hair. They know they can tell you anything and you'll say, "Oh, no way! Spill the beans." In fact, in certain moments of my life, people would come and share gossip with me. The first question I asked myself was, what am I projecting for these people to interpret that what they're telling me can even interest me? When people would call me and say, Dante, did you hear about what happened with that person? I would ask, what am I projecting? That I have the profile of somebody that likes to hear gossip and spread it further? So I did a self-evaluation. Why would somebody choose me to deposit their verbal diarrhea in me? Well, the point is, 5 million Israelites walked by Felipe's tent, and everybody asks why the family remains in the same place. That's the general comment amongst the people. Why aren't the Cohens moving with us? But I insist, the Cohens have decided to stay behind in the wilderness when the last ray of sun, because the Exodus takes the whole day for everyone to pack their luggage and leave. When the final ray of sun is hidden behind the mountains, the silhouette of the last family is also lost behind the horizon, and the Cohens are in their tent alone with their animals. And they were left silent in the middle of nothing, and now the calm is absolute. It's almost deafening. Felipe takes a deep breath in. He fills his lungs with fresh air many times. It's the sensation when somebody stops coming to church and they say, it's not so bad. And they reason, my decision wasn't so bad after all. Rebecca was right. First of all, they don't have to wait for a cloud to tell them what to do anymore. They don't have to depend on a GPS. They also don't depend on Moses or his occasional outbursts, if he ever had them. They don't have to deal with nosy neighbors or the woman that sings while she showers. Darkness has fallen on them because I insist it took a whole day for the Exodus to continue. Now they're back in bed, and Rebecca doesn't really speak. She smiles, grateful for her husband's unconditional support in such a transcendental decision. She said, finally he listens to me. Until Salome, their 12-year-old girl, for the first time says a phrase that she had never said in her 12 years of life. She says, Mom, it's a little cold, don't you think? Yeah, it's true. The temperature hasn't stopped falling this night. Rebecca puts more blankets on her children, especially Aziel, who's 3 years old, and he can't stop shaking. He can't stop chattering his teeth. And so as the sun is tucked behind the mountains, the temperature falls at a meteoric rate. The wind that comes through the cracks in the tent. At first, the writers of the scripture, or the detractors of the scriptures, especially atheists, affirmed that there was never an Exodus because they said that no mortal could have resisted the high daily temperatures of the wilderness or the low, extremely low nocturnal temperatures in the same wilderness. During the night, you could literally be frozen. So they say it's impossible for 5 million people to survive. They didn't have the necessary thermal clothes to survive the night. What atheists didn't know, and also the Cohens didn't suspect, is that the column of glory during the day and night was a column of fire, and that's what maintained the ideal temperature in the environment around them. That column of fire was like a heater for all the people. Now, since the column is gone, there is no heater for this family. The Cohens just lost their fire. That was the first sign of leaving God's will. They just lost their fire. I always maintained the idea that in spiritual terms, nobody can get cold from night to day. The fallacy of, oh, this person fell into sin, because to fall, it seems like it's the hole's fault that somebody dug. It's as if you're going through life saying, the joy of the Lord, and then, you fall into the hole. The phrase would be, they entered into sin, not fell into sin. Because if not, it would be someone else's fault, not the person that sins. Why would you have to repent over a hole that somebody else dug on the road? So great falls are always preceded by small cracks. A childish, petty decision makes our soul grow cold one day. We allow an argument that we shouldn't have had, and one night we discover that our life of prayer is absent. We tell our mind, we say a few phrases in our mind before we go to bed, and that's our prayer life. That column of fire is just a distant memory of that first love. Life is monotonous. It has no surprises. The passages that used to encourage us are now just dark hieroglyphs with no meaning. And during the night, any episode, new series on Netflix will be more appealing than listening to any Christian music or reading the Bible. Sermons don't attract us anymore like before. They seem predictable, redundant. Nothing feeds us anymore. Nothing helps us grow. The praise begins to become boring, flavorless. We try and show up late to church to not have to put up with it. We lose the sense of what it means to congregate, and we reason and say, well, if during the pandemic I didn't have to congregate, or if I survived without congregating, I don't see why I should go to a church now. And this goes for anyone watching anywhere in the world. There are many people that stopped congregating, saying, there's no reason to. Congregating doesn't save, and it's true, but it does make you go cold. When you set a coal apart from all the other coals, whether you like it or not, it starts to go out. One Sunday we discovered that getting ready to go to church takes a heroic effort, and that's the day we begin to grow cold. That cold seeps into our heart, just like the Cohens. The Cohens go through the worst night of their lives, the most frigid, glacial night of their lives, and the first rays of sun that come out at about 5:30, 6 in the morning, they're like a gift from God. Rebecca goes out, wrapped up in all the blankets that they had, to go and look for the daily manna, the breakfast. She thought, well, we went through a very cold night, but a nutritious, frugal breakfast is going to return the right mood to our family after a terrible night. But the morning has another bitter surprise for Rebecca. There's no manna for breakfast. And Felipe says, it's impossible that there's no manna. Keep looking. It should have fallen with the dew of the morning. No, but if in 14 years we never lacked any food, what Mr. Cohen and Rebecca now ignored is that the manna came from the cloud. No cloud, no manna. No cloud, no provision from God. Now there's no cloud, there's no provision from God. That's the second sign that you've left God's will. The first sign is the cold in your soul. The second is that a poor decision, I've seen it always. It always affects our income. A wrong move always ends up leading you to an empty table. Accounts that can't get paid, salaries that aren't enough. I've never seen anyone moving in rebellion to be prosperous. The darkness of unemployment, creditors that don't forgive us, debts that corral us, credit cards with interests that overwhelm us. Throughout all these years of my Christian pilgrimage, I've been taught that when somebody moves in rebellion, it doesn't matter how they disguise their decisions, whether they say, God showed me, He spoke to me, I don't share the vision. The most clear sign is going to be their finances, their economy. I've gotten to know many people that got to God asking for provision, and as soon as they were blessed, they forgot about Him. They sang, I surrender to Him. But when the moment finally came, they didn't surrender anything, not even 10% of their salary. The attitude looked more like, Lord, I surrender to you, but now that I'm doing well, stay far from my money. Stay far away from my business. First is my job, my work. I have to think about my family. And it's always a financial collapse. When these decisions are made, always, 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 the enemy will pass on the the invoice. There's no mystery. Sometimes you ask, why am I stagnant? Well, maybe you work all day, but you don't have God's favor. And without God's favor, you can work, put in all your effort, and one day they'll steal it all from us. Without God's favor, one day, what is not insured can burn down, our employees quit, we lose clients, and you ask, like I said at the beginning, why am I stagnant? Well, what I'm trying to do now is that together, we excavate together. We look to see if we've maybe made a wrong decision. No cloud, no provision from God. But legend says that Felipe had Hispanic blood. And a Hispanic person is used to surviving with very little. So Felipe says, all right, it's fine. No problem. Let's not make drama out of this, Rebecca. Maybe God wants us to fast. That's why today we have no manna, because God is asking us to fast. Poor Felipe, he thinks that God is dealing with him. And so then he says, what all those that disobey say at one point or another. They say what they would like for God to say, but God really isn't saying it. Incredibly, he calls this a treatment from God. But in reality, God has nothing to do with it. This is a situation that he generated. When you're doing not so well, we say, oh, God is testing me. God is challenging me. Well, sometimes yes, but the majority of times, God has nothing to do with it, not even the devil. People say, the devil's attacking me, and the devil says, what are you getting me involved for? You decided to stay behind. God is dealing with me. Well, what do I have to do with it? I put you under the cloud. If the crisis comes, it sounds better if we disguise it with reverence, but sometimes you have to have what you have to have and call it by name. Disobedience, and disobedience produces consequences. This isn't God is filtering us out, God is calling me to pray, or God is calling me to fast. No, not necessarily. This means a consequence of disobedience. And it occurs to Rebecca that if there's no food today, it's fine. Maybe her husband is right. Maybe they'll just drink some water. Because any human being can survive a good amount of time without eating, but very little time without drinking water. And as the first rays of sun come out, it's about 7 a.m. Any trace of water has evaporated outside of the tent. There are no miraculous rocks that pour out water. Moses isn't around. The neighbors that used to store a bit of water in a canteen are long gone. This is the third sign of leaving from beneath the cloud. They say that if we stop drinking liquids, our coherent thoughts begin to disappear. I know many women are saying, well, then I think my husband needs to drink some water. Your skin dries out, your vital organs retract. Our eyes need moisture to be able to cry, to be able to lubricate themselves. Our mouth needs liquid to be able to swallow. Our glands need sweat to keep the body fresh. Our cells demand blood to be transported. And our joints need fluid to lubricate. But when there's no water, you have a dry mouth, a heavy tongue, a headache, weak knees. And the same happens with our souls. The hearts that are set apart from God's will end up dehydrated, irritated with insomnia, loneliness, bitterness, irritability, insecurity, anxiety. These are the symptoms of dryness in the depths of our being. Of course, when there's no cloud, there's no water. We might find a watering hole that's unclean, and then, yes, maybe, after all, we'll drink from contaminated sewage systems with pathogens. That's when people say, I don't feel good, I feel anxious, I'm going to drink another glass of wine, I'm going to smoke something, I'm going to have more sex, whatever it is. This is a bad day for the Cohens. But even then, they haven't lost hope. They consider that anyone can have a bad day, but that maybe tomorrow everything will be different. Though there's nothing to eat for dinner, the marriage that didn't have breakfast, didn't have lunch or dinner. They sit around the table and they hold hands symbolically, and they'll have a brief family devotional. God couldn't have forgotten about us, Rebecca says. We served him for 14 years. What Rebecca ignores is that God doesn't measure by averages. He doesn't say, oh, well, now you're outside of my will, you're in a disaster, but I should understand that it's just the first time. Well, now you're unloyal, but your years of loyalty allow you this time. Well, he didn't prepare to preach or minister this time, but I'm going to bless him due to his old days. No! God doesn't bless by averages. One poor decision can ruin an entire life of good decisions. Mr. Cohen tries to begin a prayer at the head of the family table. But Rebecca interrupts him because she realizes that the girl in the middle, Abilene, is redder than usual. Her skin literally looks burnt and charred. She touches her forehead and discovers with horror that her daughter has a high fever, also Tiago and Asiel. They're all complaining that their head hurts. Rebecca lifts their shirts and looks at their back and realizes that their backs are completely full of sores, and she says, this cannot be happening. She interrupts a prayer that Felipe couldn't even begin. She says, Felipe, in 14 years the sun never harmed our children. But what she didn't realize is that the solar filter for her children was the cloud. That's the fourth sign that you've moved from God's will. If there is no cloud, there will be no protection for our children. There is no solar filter. I'm aware that there are many adults here that were brought up in homes that didn't have God as the center, and that your first years you didn't develop in a Christian household, and sometimes your memories of your childhood cause you pain. They cursed you, they ignored you, they demeaned you, they discriminated you, and you thought that the treatment they were giving you was a normal treatment until you grew up and realized that that wasn't the case, that the treatment that they gave you in your childhood was not normal. You dealt with abuse, psychological, intimate, sexual. And so I speak to all the adults that are conflicted with certain family secrets. I speak to the husbands that during the night sleep with a wife that is broken, even though now she's an adult. She's like a withered sapling. People that hide secrets that makeup can't hide. Nowadays, the church has to realize that the problems in adults are rooted in their experiences of their childhood. God makes things new, yes, but within us lives the child that we once were. Some of us are children that have survived. In others, that child is dead. But we were all children once. These adult dysfunctions were all influenced by the presence or absence of those that fathered us. A father, a mother, an orphanage, grandparents. And under no motivation can we condemn ourselves or be condemned to repeat history with our own children. We will not be forgiven by God if we do that. Those of us that lived sad childhoods, we had atheist parents, ignorant parents, academically speaking, atheists. We don't have the option of not giving protection to our children. A child is the only eternal thing that we can ever have in our arms, because it's a soul that will eternally live somewhere. That's why each decision that we make, we have to know that we're fighting for the soul of a child. Whatever mother or father that ignores that there is a battle today for their family will be a witness of how hell invades their home. There's a battle from schools, from what is produced on streaming. There's a battle for our children. And it's not enough to just be worried and pray. You have to create a secure place while they live beneath our roofs. And we have to lift up walls of protection. This doesn't mean that you become an FBI mom. Our responsibility is not to follow them around, track them to see where they are, or start to tell them things once they're adults. No, no, no. Our assignment is to surround them with a Christian environment. It's proven that the environment has more influence than genes. Your environment is more important than your genes. Did you know? If a child is born in a home where there is a piano, a guitar, their parents play music, everyone listens to music, then most likely they'll become a musician. That is called the power of your environment. And sometimes parents come up to me and say, please, I want you to bless my child. And my answer is always the same. Nobody can go above and beyond the blessing from a parent. There's a coverage that only us parents can give. No pastor can give it, no apostle, no matter how anointed they are. Us parents have a coverage. Netflix and Instagram are not going to raise our children. They're not going to educate them. In any case, they're going to indoctrinate them, but they won't educate them. Your nanny won't teach them values, not their daycare, not in kindergarten. The internet won't form them. Their teachers won't be able to give them what only by spiritual authority we as parents can give. Psalm 127:3 says, children are a gift from the Lord. They are a reward from Him. Children are like arrows in a warrior's hands. How joyful is the man whose quiver is full of them. If children are like arrows, then by consequence, the mother and father represent the archer. Whether or not you belong to a functional family or not, if you're divorced or not, separated or not, or if you're a mom or single dad, a mother and a father are the archers. And if we aim that bow, that arrow, towards materialism, then your children will love money above all. Pointing towards materialism doesn't mean you have to have a rich father for you to be materialistic. Those that love money can be poor and miserable like a rat, or a multimillionaire with thousands, if not millions in the bank. Because you're poor. One is poor because they love money, and the other is rich because they love money. Money isn't the problem. The love of money is the problem. And there are people that don't eat bananas to not throw out the peel. Their children see it. You're going to have a miserable child. You can name your child Jerry, Mickey, any mouse name, because that's what they're going to become. They saw. To think that our child will be faithful in the church when we don't even guide them in that direction, it's illogical. If the child never saw that their mother's bow pointed towards being generous and giving, tithing and sowing, then they're not going to be giving. We can never expect our children to be better than us if we were miserable. So our actions shout louder than any of our sermons, any of our teachings. And may God never allow it. May God never allow us, some of us, to say goodbye to our children around a grave, because there is no name for that. But all of us, without exception, are going to say goodbye to our children from their family homes. Not because they pass away, but because one day they say goodbye. They abandon their toys forever. Or the posters in their rooms change. Instead of Barney and Mickey, it's Taylor Swift and Messi. And as if it were from one day to the next, the mastodon presents the woman that he'll share the rest of his life with her. That's what he believes. An unknown woman that dares take your 38-year-old boy, Mom. Imagine that. She's not going to cook for him the way I do. She doesn't know how he likes his noodles. The day our little girl confesses that she has a boyfriend. And we all know that madman isn't worthy of our princess, no matter who it is. And us parents say, I don't like that lustful look that he directs towards my daughter. It's not that there's a bias or that you're discriminating. If your husband says, I don't like how that lustful man looks at my daughter, he has a point, because that's the same look that he had, and he recognizes it. Or maybe our child goes to live by himself, or he has to go somewhere far away to study, or maybe a divorce doesn't allow you to see him until next weekend. And so these poor decisions are what could have marked them. You feel pain over the words that you said during moments of anger, those moments in which you ignored them. And you say, if only I could go back 15 years and repair my relationship with my child, with my son, my daughter. The day you have to say goodbye, you'd like to stop the clock for at least a couple of years. But time has no pause button. Life, our job, took away the time that we could have had with our children. And now we won't have a second opportunity to go to their graduation, to congratulate them over their good grades, or punish them over their bad grades. You want to get to know the heart of an adult? Ask their children. They observe us in the moments of victory. They watch how we react during defeats. They know how dad reacts when things are going well, and they know how dad explodes or bursts out when he's under pressure. They're the silent witnesses that pretend to watch TV while dad criticizes the church. It seems like the child maybe doesn't understand much when the mom gossips against the leaders or against the vision, but they hear it all through the walls. I know it. First of all, because I was a child. I heard everything. Maybe I didn't understand who they were talking about, but I knew that mom and dad dedicated themselves like scavengers to dismember the people of the church. And we never ate the table on the food. We always ate roasted pastor, fried deacon, an usher with an apple in her mouth. We were always eating up someone. And you store everything away in your small heart. And one day when you say goodbye to your home, everything that unconsciously marked your childhood comes out to the light. All those poor decisions that we've made as parents will make the sun wreak havoc on our children's skin. Rebecca can see her children's burnt skin, and there's no Sunday school that can contain her children. Maybe she blames the church. Maybe the easiest resort is to say that they speak English in this country and she doesn't, or maybe it was all the demons attacking her children. But in this case, Rebecca knows that if you're not beneath the cloud, don't ask for protection for your children, much less blame the environment, blame the sun. She knew that if she didn't follow Moses, she would be the one in trouble. It surprises me when somebody says, well, I'm an adult. It's my decision and it doesn't affect anyone. But we forget the generational curses. In this case, she forgot. She completely ignored her children's health. The smallest ones, the ones that would pay and are paying for the consequence, paying the consequence of the wrong decision. The Cohens now know that they don't have to say anything else. They know it. They have no more words. They pack their luggage as quickly as they can. All they have as a witness is the light of the moon. They look for their things in the darkness. There is no time to pack everything up. They quickly decide to join the rest beneath a cloud. Maybe if they run, maybe if they walk all night, they'll be able to catch up on time. Because that's what happens when our children's health, for example, is at risk. You no longer debate or argue over foolish things. You no longer say, oh, I don't share the vision. I don't like how I was treated. Everything becomes irrelevant. When illness knocks on our door, when our health becomes fragile, when our finances break